Hello and welcome to PodcastGG Contenders South America edition for the mid-season catch-up. I am Lobosco, and I have three incredibly big brain guys that are going to be with me tonight. You've seen them plenty on South American Contenders. It is Pokemon Panda, Heurix, and Lafon, as we're going to kind of take you through how everything has gone. But of course, let's just start off, guys. We're at the mid-season point. How's everybody feeling as far as how the season's gone for yourself personally? Let's start with the man who's making this all happen in Panda.
I'm honestly taken away with how the season has gone through Contenders. Normally we see in different regions teams stray away from the rest of the pack, and they really lead the charge, kind of like how Based Tryhards are doing in Group A. But if you take a look at Group B, how wide open it is, and just how open the rest of the teams besides Based Tryhards are really locked into their seeds so far, is probably the most exciting part for me this South American season.
Definitely is. Lafon?
I think this is a really weird one because I think this season there's a lot to talk about in terms of how the region has kind of balanced itself out. We're still top heavy a little bit, and we still see Based Tryhards, formerly Brazil Gaming House, obviously. But I think kind of this is the first season where we're kind of seeing a little bit towards the bottom end or towards the mid end. It's kind of like I can't really separate the teams skill wise, and I think that's really cool. It's fun to build storylines around teams that are good and good enough to compete against each other day in, day out.
Definitely is. It's been so fun so far, and I know Heurix, you and I have gotten to cast some really good games too.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had some good showings for sure with this season already. I mean, we're only about just over halfway through, getting into season or week 4 now. I mean, I have to agree with Lafon though. The parity that we're seeing in this region right now is insane. I mean, yeah, you do have Based Tryhards certainly standing out. You do have a couple of teams that are certainly quite a ways behind, but that middle of the pack region is so compelling. I mean, like I said, it seems clear that Based Tryhards is on top. You've got LFT, you've got Up, and maybe Heurix now, as well as kind of a sort of clear top 4 perhaps. But you can lump in every other one of those other teams, LFO, Predators, Caverna, Sakino Nation, maybe even Fury. And if you're talking about peak performance levels, you can kind of throw in Quad and Ints into that as well. You throw all of those guys into a group, and I guarantee you that no analyst, none of us, no one else could ever interpret or predict which team is going to make it out every single time. It's so close between all those teams.
Without a doubt it is, and we'll take a quick look here too at how the overview of things have gone up until this point. Starting off with Group A, of course, it's Based Tryhards, once known as Brazil Gaming House. They're setting the pace. They are currently 3-0 on the season. They haven't lost a map yet, so they have 12 map wins. Behind them is Predators Esports, 2-1, 7 map wins for them, 5 map losses. Then Caverna, who's at 2-1 as well, but they have 1 less map win, so they're 6-0-7. Then setting out the players that are teams that are currently in that playoff spot. Sakino Nation is in that 4th spot at 1-2, 5-0-7. Then Quad Gaming 1-2, Ints Esports 0-3. Group B, on the other hand, LFTOWL is the team setting the pace. It was Up Gaming, who is now the one just below them, 2-1 after they lost to them in one of the recent weeks. Heurix Gaming 2-1 as well, tied there, but Up Gaming has only lost 3 maps. 3 of those to the team just above them, looking for Org in that 4th spot, and then Fury and Black Dragons rounding things out. So as far as looking here, guys, it's just sort of this overview of what we've seen so far. I mean, what teams to you have looked the best? It's been, I mean, I think the two guys at the top are probably the ones that we're going to say are the ones that are the clear favorites at this point.
Based Tryhards are definitely at the top. That's for sure. We can definitely go. I mean, we'll probably touch up on that later on, how they're the clear-cut favorites. They always have been. But I think the team that stood out for me personally is actually Contenders Esports. Speaking of Based Tryhards, when they were still under the Brazil Gaming House name, the first week when they completely wiped the floor with Contenders Esports, I almost wrote off Contenders Esports altogether. I remember having conversations with Lafon specifically about TSN and how this is about to be like the breakout team. We were so impressed, but slowly Contenders Esports to me has been impressing. Just off of alone, like their interesting play style, the way that they swap roles mid-match. You don't really see many teams doing that these days, especially with Silveria. The off tank, as they're listed on our roster, but throws out the Doomfist every so often to pretty good success.
I think it's one of those strange things, right? Like Caverna, it's a team that when we came into the season, I wasn't too high on, mostly because like I wasn't sure what they'd bring. It was a team that was like, here's the thing, in South America, but at the beginning of this season, season 3, right? We saw teams were like, these are the teams to beat. Based Tryhards, formerly Brazil Gaming House. These guys are literally the team to beat in this region. We saw them at the World Cup. They were really strong there. We saw them obviously in season 2, and we're seeing them in season 3. They're the strongest team, and for very good reason. But then like below that, I actually thought it was gonna like even out a little bit more. I thought LFT Owl looking for Org, Fury to a certain extent, and that like I thought those teams would be the ones where obviously those are in the other group, but the point being, I thought those teams would be a little bit more on the high end. Caverna was what I was not too impressed by, and they came in and it almost seemed like, so week 1 when we were talking about them on the desk, especially, I think one of the things we highlighted is that's switching around. Like the Silvera would go to the DPS role. I think it was Cappy Mac would switch over to the off tank. It was just a mess. And somehow they're making it work. And I think that's kind of interesting because if you look at Overwatch in general, the amount of times you actually swap roles mid-game is very, very infrequent. So the fact that I think Caverna brought that and is making it work is perhaps the most interesting thing about that group, to me anyway.
I think something that helped them, though, I mean, if we look back to their stint in trials, and we even look into, I believe it was week 1 where they were still doing it, exactly what you're talking about, where we saw that kind of mismatching and stuff like that, you know, Silvera coming in, playing some Doomfist. We would see Cappy Mac playing Zarya. We would see Maka oftentimes on the Brig. I mean, pretty much exclusively Brig duty outside of, you know, a couple of times bringing out the Sombra. So you have your main hit scan threat. You have Maka, the guy that you're looking to make the plays, constantly having to swap with Cappy, who is taking over some of the Zarya plays because he does have that experience on that particular hero. And then you have Maka falling back into Brig, and you see a lot of swapping that didn't necessarily need to be made. I mean, a lot of times we often see, you know, the Zarya be, you know, like a hit scan, right? Like typically in like a goat style composition, it's an easy swap. You know, you drop out the Zarya and you have, you know, a quick swap over to a DPS, and now all of a sudden you can run a 2-2-2 dive split, and you can keep your off tank on Diva without having to swap, and you aren't losing as much ult value in that regard. So I think Caverna, what they did going into week 2 was they were saying, hey, let's make an adjustment so that we can get some clear cut you know, decision making going into every single one of our fights, where we're not constantly swapping things up. You know, where sometimes we're going to be calling for this player to make Zarya plays. Sometimes we're going to be calling this player. They just said, let's go ahead, let's put Mac on it so that we can have that flexibility for him to be able to play that hit scan DPS role. And I think that alone has worked out so well for them, because now they can start focusing on fine tuning, because they aren't having some of those problems with you know, the levels of consistency, or rather lack thereof. And also they recentered their play around Schwazu. And they do a lot of things based on rotational plays mid-fight that have worked out very, very well for them. I mean, BGH made a name for themselves off of being able to rotate, disengage, and engage. It seems as though Caverna is kind of falling in that kind of footsteps.
I think to your point, though, a little bit of what allows them to do that is that South America in general as a region is so, I don't want to say chaotic, but it's certainly very aggressive is probably the best way of putting it, because they are absolutely aggressive in their gameplay. And I think one thing is, you don't know what you're playing against when you get Caverna, right? And that kind of plays into their favor. You can't be aggressive against something you don't know. And I feel like Caverna is taking that and making the most of it, especially against the maps they played on. Keep in mind, they don't do this in every single map. It's I think in the first week they did, but then in the second and third week they're like, yeah, that doesn't work. Let's stabilize just a little bit. And so now we see them switch usually based on maps or attack or defense. So I think for Caverna, they're taking advantage of some of just basically the style that South America plays in a way that I think is kind of refreshing, because I think, Panda, you can talk to this too a little bit, is that when we analyze team fights in South America, we have to be very careful with how we do it, because no team fight is ever really won or lost until everybody is gone. So I think that's kind of like Caverna is really taking advantage from that.
I will always remember a team fight that happened last season where it was on Lijiang Tower, it was Night Market, and it came down to Tracers and Lucios, and literally both Tracers killed each other and nobody capped the point at the end of it. It was probably what really stamped down that statement for this region. And no team fight is ever lost. It's always winnable. There's always those openings, and you're right. I think Caverna is doing a good job of taking advantage of that, but you'll see other teams to to both y'all's points is even Quad Gaming. Take a look at them when they brought on Stro, or infamously taking on the handle of XQC on a budget. When they took on him as their main tank, he really implemented a lot of free space and enabled the rest of his DPS to, quite frankly, just clean up. And that's really what those flexibility compositions are all about. And that's what this region is really showing us here, is that when you really give your all in every single team fight, you can really come up with those advantages when the fight may seem at loss. There's going to be that one member that's still low from a Winston going absolutely hamburgers in the back line, and the Widowmaker just comes in and just body taps two individuals that are half HP, and that's a one team fight easy.
And we can see more weird comps eventually coming out here too, as we're kind of getting into the later half of the season. Maybe some of those teams that maybe weren't taking as many risks will start to take some more. I mean, it's funny because this conversation started off as, what teams look the best from each group, but there's so many interesting teams. I think that it's cool to see how things can quickly devolve into, that Caverna team. They've been doing some interesting things. I was thinking about Silvera myself, who has been playing the Doomfist for them for the most part. And I think that has been super, super cool to see, is that was not exactly that kind of talks about a little bit more about their flexibility in and of a whole. But with the fact that we started with Caverna, and we were, we haven't even mentioned the team. We've mentioned them, but we haven't really talked about them. When we start looking at Group A, the team that we have to make mention of is the team at the top of this group. That is the team that everybody's chasing in Based Tryhards. I mean, this is without a doubt, guys, the top team, and the team that everybody's trying to fight for the win. 2 contender seasons in a row that they've won. I mean, they have all you can say everything about them because they've done it all.
I think even more interesting is we haven't even highlighted the fact they've lost arguably their 1 or 2 of their best players.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
I mean,
and they're still
literally okay. So in spite of having more changes to their roster since probably their Black Dragons days, I mean, that's like 2 years ago or something like that. I think this has been the most changes that they've had to their roster since those days. Where there's been, a couple of times where you see Ole was playing with them for a little bit, and you see Dezinho picked up as well. And there's been some times where they've played with other guys for whatever reason. However, this is real solid changes, and this hasn't been something that they've really had to deal with for quite a long time, and certainly not that often when they've had to. So what I think is most convincing about their ability as a team, and what makes them so dominant, is their ability to adapt to these kind of things, because they continue to be dominant. Yes, some maps are close, but they continue to still get the win. And at the end of the day, that's what you're looking for, right? You're looking for the map wins. You're still looking for that series total so that you can get into the playoffs and continue to basically continue that streak. But however, despite losing Klaus, I mean, certainly, yes, they lost Dudu, but I think it was an upgrade that they wind up picking up Klaus. Certainly, it sucks for them that they lose Klaus, and it's certainly congratulations to him for making it and taking that next step along with Alamang. But yeah, exactly, 2 steps there. But nonetheless, I mean, they still have been able to follow in that same kind of streak, not only of dominance, but their ability to pluck out the best talent in South America, right? Because if you look at what was available, or what is available in South America, you look at some of these DPS players, someone that could replace a guy like Klaus. There's not a lot of options, if any at all. Klaus is, an exceptional talent. There's a reason why he's at where he's at. But how do you replace those guys? Well, you bring in Lubak, easily one of the best DPS players that we saw all of last season, and is a big reason why a lot of people were so hyped on that breakdown team last season. There's guys like Delavine out there, but you're looking for someone to replace Dudu, who's trying to retire and trying to move on and do other things. And Lubak is easily the best option for you, and certainly, in my opinion, will mesh well with BTH and will integrate into their system very well. And then you bring on Wings, who most recently played with LFT, the other strongest roster I think that we have in this season. And not only that, but he also has LAN experience, because he just won with LFT at Game XP LAN. They just got first place like pretty recently, within the last 2 months. So, I mean, you're bringing in guys with some experience that will integrate into the system as basically as plug and play as you can possibly get. And I think that's very commendable for Based Tryhards to be able to take those losses, very big losses for the roster, and still continue to show out and get that 12-0 map score that is ridiculously hard to obtain.
To put it in perspective, in the last 2 seasons of Contenders, so we're 1.5 seasons in, Based Tryhards has lost exactly 1 map.
Yep.
Like this is a ridiculous scoreline.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it was against LFT Owl.
That's right.
Actually, it was Kings Row. I was actually casting that match, and it was one of those weird times where like, so myself and Lemon Kiwi, who was co-casting with me at the time, we were like, we didn't believe it as we were casting it. It was so out there because Based Tryhards, or BGH as they were known, they are the juggernauts. Like, maps are huge things to take off them. And the other reason why they're so strong is not just the fact they play together as a team and that they're able to integrate people in so quickly. Because again, Wings was playing last week, and he looked, I would say, he wasn't the strongest part of their roster. That much was obvious, but he wasn't extremely uncomfortable either. And very much, I think, towards the end of the series, it clearly came, like, it was almost like he was already up to speed. So I think that, yes, they slot in really well. But on top of that, every single player that's played on their roster has had moments to pop off. Like, it's not just as a team. Individually, they're also really strong. You talk about Neil, you talk about Honorato, you talk about Calero also, and Lico. These are players who, whenever you give them a moment, they will take it and they will do things with it that you don't see a lot of other players do. So I think for BTH, there's a combination of the fact they're an excellent team. They play really, really coordinatedly. There's not really a lot of gaps in their team play, right? Like, you try and take advantage, and then there's 3 more people there to back up, whoever is out of position, so to speak. And then on top of that, you're gonna have Lico pick off 4 kills, and then or Neil hits a huge shatter. There's so much there that I think as a cohesive unit, they're terrific. As individual players, they're also terrific, and they just make the most out of that every game.
I can actually go one step further on what you were saying about map losses for them. If you go back all the way to season 1 of Contenders and you take all of their map losses from season 1 till now, they have lost 4 maps. They lost 3 in season 1, and that was it. They did not lose any more. So they've lost a total of 4 maps their entire time. They haven't even lost. They're not even halfway to double digits. That's insane. That's absolutely. I mean, Panda. I mean, for you, seeing this team here with the changes that have happened, this is without a doubt the team to beat, is it not?
I mean, I feel like they showed us that so many times. Right? Like, there's no disagreeing with the fact that Based Tryhards, formerly known, again, I don't want to continue to play a broken record here, formerly known as BGH, that they are the team to beat. They are at the top. And to your point, Heurix, they have adapted really well, and I want to take that dive a little bit deeper and to attest to what they lost, not only in the Lucio player, the region's best Lucio player, but think about the Lucio on the battlefield, what it actually does for the team, right? Like, that's a lot of communication.
Especially in this meta, too.
Yeah,
Especially
it's crazy. It's
sure.
so tank-driven, and working with Neo as long as Alamang has, like, that's actually very impactful to the team. Like, that's where you really tip your hats to how good of a team Based Tryhards are. They're not just the mechanically insane team because they've implemented Klaus, now they've implemented Wings, and yeah, Wings took a little bit of a slow start in his showcase match, or his opening match with Based Tryhards last week, but he fell right into his own, and he was really filling those shoes, which are huge, by the way, of Alamang. And I feel like Lobosco is just going to do the same exact thing. I mean, I don't want to say that he's the upgraded version of Dudu, but I feel like just because Dudu's been taking that time away from the game of Overwatch, again, going back to where the meta currently is and where the map rotation is for the season of Contenders, will we end up going over to Hanamura, Horizon Lunar Colony, or Hollywood even? Would you get that flex DPS? I think that's where Lobosco's really going to shine. That's where I really gained an interest in this competitive player last season of Contenders. His Widowmaker play is fantastic. He'll flex over to anything at a moment's notice, and time has only come in between where tanks are certainly in to where DPS can be flexed into, and I think Based Tryhards as a whole are really going to integrate Lubbock very well. If not, he's probably already fitting in right at home with going back to our first conversation of that aggressive play. I mean, We've seen Neo even on the Overwatch World Cup group stage in LA. I mean, the man's aggressive. Let's put it that way, and that'll definitely interest a Widowmaker to hit some shots.
Well, let's talk about Lubbock a little bit more, because this is important, not just obviously for Based Tryhards for what they get, but you look at the Sakino Nation. I always want to call them Team Sakino Nation for some reason, but they're the Sakino Nation. This is a big loss for them as far as you talk about the DPS players on their team that were really important, but not only that, they're a team that's actually looked like they were going to be the second best team possibly in this group. They are right now sitting in the last spot. So as far as this team goes, they're now in a even tougher situation because they lose him. So what does Lubbock mean for not only Based Tryhards, but for Sakino Nation?
Sorry, go ahead, Lafon, please.
Well, I think actually we don't even have to look that far. We just have to look at Group B and what team he left from,
right,
to the TSN, right? And we kind of get an idea of just how much he means. He left Breakdown last season, who were upstarts. The story of Breakdown was great, but I think Lubbock was probably one of the the reasons why. Just a fantastic player, and I think not just fantastic, but aggressive and cocky almost. Super confident in his own talent. And you need that sometimes. You need to be able to take the 1v1s or the 1v2s or the 1v3s and be like, yeah, whatever, this is normal. I'll take it and win. Leaves Breakdown, they kind of struggle this season, and then goes over TSN, looked pretty good. They kind of struggle. I think leaving TSN, it's going to put TSN in a really weird position. They picked up, who was it? Dagestim, actually.
Correct.
And then Darkin is moving over to the DPS. So, like, TSN's in a really weird spot, and I think Lubbock leaving is going to, like, highlight that even more.
I will say, though, that picking up Dagestim was actually quite a good move, because Dagestim is one of those divas that I think can really be a standout. I mean, it's no mistake, TSN was, at least in my mind, and certainly a lot of the people that I've talked to have reciprocated this notion that TSN was the team to look at. Coming out of trials, yes, there were other teams that were good coming out of trials, but it seemed like with this pairing of Delavinia and with Lubbock, that was going to be, something kind of akin to the the Dudu Lico pairing that we've seen historically from Based Tryhards or Brazil Gaming House. I mean, it's one of those pairings that's incredibly flexible. There's some crossover, but it's not too much where you can't still get some versatility. Obviously, standout players in and of themselves. They're easily some of the top players in South America, outside guys like Klaus and Valen, and certainly Lico is in that conversation as well, for sure, without a doubt. These are two guys that you have to look at as being like, okay, maybe those guys are the top three, sure, but Delavinia and Lubbock, if you're talking about some top 5 action, you're throwing in those guys, you're throwing in the guys from Up Gaming, and I would probably draw the line there. I mean, that's how good they are, and that's how good we expect them to be because of this pickup, because of this setup that they had with this duo. Now I think they're in a position where, yes, they pick up Dagestim. I think he's a great diva. I think he's going to be good for the team, but they're getting a slight decline in their ability on DPS. Certainly Darkin is a great player. Yes, you can go as far as to say that he is great, but he's not Lubbock. He's certainly not. And I think a lot of this is going to be a case where he's going to be picking up Brig a lot more often. They might even play solo DPS roles. I think this is also a calculated pickup,
though. I think it's also a calculated pickup just in the switches because of the meta we're in, right? Like, yeah, Darkin is moving over to DPS, but how much DPS is he actually going to play, right?
It's going to be a very niche situation.
Right.
Yeah. And I think they're betting on the fact that there's just enough meta dependency there that you can play Darkin and he's not going to look like a downgrade when he plays the DPS role, right? I mean, it sounds like we're talking down Darkin, but I think this more speaks to how much we're talking up Lubbock, because again,
absolutely,
it's not that Darkin's bad. I think Darkin's good. It's just that I think Lubbock he not only has mechanical talent, he has the mentality to be a top tier player.
Well, correct me
which
if
I think
I'm
is
wrong,
arguably
too.
More important.
Lubbock was playing the Zarya role for Breakdown Gaming, or was he playing the Brigitte?
He was playing,
or not for Breakdown. I'm sorry, yeah, for TSN.
Yeah. I believe he was playing the Zarya.
Yeah, he was playing that Zarya. So it's like that mechanical skill that you were just talking about. And it's the same thing if you bring him all the way back to the previous season where I tripped out Breakdown Gaming when he was with the ragtag group of individuals that made it through trials. Even like he was really the most engaged in those compositions, right? Like it was do or die by his skill, and you kind of saw that in the Zarya play. I remember from TSN, which really made me pay closer attention to TSN on the opening week when they walked out and looked like the team to put up against Based Tryhards, and I think that was again just Lubbock, just what he does when he's really just in control and he's in the zone, and I think that's. Again, we're just more up talking Lubbock at this point, but that's just what he brings to the team. He's that clutch factor, right?
It's funny because he's not going to be playing Zarya on the team he's going to
Probably
right now,
not.
too.
Probably
So
not.
now he does become that. Did you call it Brigada? Is that what I heard you say?
Brigada would actually, that'd be a very scary hero. And
I know, but that's what I
Zenyatta
thought
with
I
the
heard from
Discord,
you.
and then he walks up and shield bashes you. Like
Yeah.
Zenyatta just became jacked.
Just as an aside, we actually got to see Based Tryhards versus TSN, I think last week. And it's kind of interesting because TSN did not run goats, or they ran very, very little, or very, very little goats in that matchup. They actually ran the Sombra Doomfist more frequently, and they kind of, I mean, they didn't beat Based Tryhards, but they definitely showed that Based Tryhards wasn't perfect. So, and I mean, a lot of that's based on the DPS play because the Sombra Doomfist comp kind of struggles against a really good goats team. So that's just a highlight. I think the fact that they were able to do that between Delavigne and of course and Lubbock. So there was a lot there in that matchup that was kind of interesting to watch, just from an analytical point of view. So I mean that's definitely something to see as Lubbock moves over to BTH.
It definitely will be. And looking forward, though, I mean, there's still some more teams we got to talk about in this Group A because, you know, we kind of highlighted Caverna sort of at the beginning there, but this is still a team that has really came out of nowhere. It is really sort of what it was. Like you guys were saying earlier, this was a team we didn't expect to be in this spot, but now here they are. Now there's all these changes going around on some of the teams in their own group. It sort of solidifies them as being a playoff team more than likely at this point. What has been the biggest cause of this uprising? Obviously, we talked a little bit about kind of more firm roles, but there has to be more than just that.
For Caverna? Like, I just think as a whole for the region, it becomes that engaging fact. They always have something up their sleeves. There's always that team that has like that trick. Like there's always that composition just throws you off, right? Like it's kind of just going back to that original talk of this region as a whole. Like they're always willing to throw everything at you, and it's when you don't expect a Doomfist is where one of the DPS pull it out, or a Sombra, and I think that's very engaging in a way. But it's more to it because we've been seeing so much tank play out of this region in particular that it just really comes down to the smaller things, just which Zenyatta is really just doing better, and I think there's something more to just look at there, and that's why the groups as we were just talking about are so open outside of the number 1 seeds.
With Caverna though, especially, I think, you know, with Doomfist at least, I don't think it's as surprising as it once was. I mean, certainly season 2, there's a lot of surprise factor there. You look at even the really, really solid run that we saw as Edgicus joined up with Up Gaming, you know, last season with that roster back then before they were Up Gaming, and made a quick turnaround playing chaotic styles and catching teams off guard. I don't think that's necessarily the case anymore because we have seen so much Sombra, we have seen so much Doom, comparatively to last season and obviously any other season, as Doom has only been around for a short time now. But I think the more compelling argument for Caverna's big upswing and the big change is the fact that we didn't really have a real gauge for what to expect because obviously this is a new Caverna as per what we saw last season, completely new roster.
One player, I think, from last season, right?
It could be one, but I mean, basically what they did was they pulled a team out of trials that was very solid, but maybe had a little bit of roughness around the edges. And we saw them start kind of fine-tuning things. They were able to take away some of that roughness, again, some of that roughness being very apparent. And the fact that Maka, Silvera, and Cappy Mac were all on kind of the same role all at once, right? I mean, you have guys doing flex DPS and flex tank duties simultaneously, swapping between maps. Silvera is certainly their most prominent and proficient Doomfist player. So if they do want to play those styles, then they do have to kind of swap things up. But I think giving some consistency to their composition so that they can start focusing on the minutia, I think is something that has really helped them. Because we can see that in their play. They're now starting to get a lot better at focusing at their macro play. We've seen the rotations happening, certainly around Joazou as well, where, you know, with Orisa comps, they look probably as good or better than any other team other than BTH that I can think of with Orisa comps and with rotational play, because certainly South America hasn't been a standout region for that kind of play. So with Cavern, I think that's the most compelling thing, is the fact that they isolated a problem and they've adapted and fixed it.
It's funny.
I just want to fact check us for really quickly. Lubak actually did play the Brigitte in the goats composition for TSN.
He did end
So
up
he's
playing the
They
brig.
didn't play much. They didn't play much goats though.
Yeah.
When they
didn't
do play
much.
goats, he did play the brig, and when they played
Yeah.
Protect McCree comp, Delavinia was playing McCree. So
Yeah.
put that in perspective.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
so
true.
I mean that's still pretty
Because
big
Lubak, again,
implications,
Lubak's
nevertheless.
hero pool is like projectile, hit scan, crossover. There's a lot
Right.
there, which to the
So
point
what
is
a
that's something we're gonna
categories
say.
these
That's
DPS
gonna say,
now.
yeah, that's what we're gonna say a lot about a lot of the players in this region, is that a lot of them have that hero pool that's just like, take a slice from every part of it, and then that's kind of their hero pool. It's not like anything is like, I think
weird.
I think even moving forward in Overwatch though,
He's
Right.
weirdly more of a. So, like, if you think about in terms of South America and all these other DPS players, right? Certainly a standout for flexibility, like the go-to guy for, playing whatever you need. It's going to be Liko every time, right?
Yeah.
I would say Lubak is a more specialist-ish version of that, where he can play everything. He will play everything, whatever the composition needs, and he will play it to a high level. But on certain specific things, I think he's a true standout. Not only will he excel, but he will really, really excel at those particular characters. I mean, you look at some of his play on Hitscan, where he's played, sometimes even Soldier, and he's nuts. I mean, nuts on Soldier. And it's hard to be nuts on a character like
Yeah.
that, because you not only do you have to consistently worry about aiming and focusing on like literally just tracking targets, but
Right.
also simultaneously positional play, all the while also calling out for your teammates, because that is your role as the soldier. And in most standard compositions that play a soldier, you are calling out targets, locations, you're calling out for your tanks, if there's any flankers, so that they need to pull back and hit, some kind of counter dive or to push players off and peel. So there's a lot that you have to focus on, and to really excel at that role takes a lot, not just from you mechanically, but also communication and just your general game sense and your ability to just adapt to literally everything under pressure all the while. So I think Lubak excels in those situations, and it's not just a soldier play that makes me believe that, but you even look at some of the other compositions that they played in TSN and the ones that they played in Breakdown that were so compelling, where he's played basically every single hero, much like Liko. And I think that's why, like I said before, he's going to fit well and mesh well, kind of just sliding right into that BTH system. It's going to work perfectly.
I agree,
Yeah.
and I'm glad you brought it up too, because it even comes down to not only just the like the soldier just to shoot the forehead, but like it also comes down to that big brain macro play. Like and it comes down to your team setting up for that play, and that's what this region is certainly offering. Instead of just that flashy DPS play, they're really opening up the 3-3 can of chips. They're really opening it up wide, man. It's nice because you really get to see how much space Winston creates and really sets up those DPS. And I almost wish that we could hear the communication. I personally wouldn't understand them, but it's always very interesting, regardless, just to hear the teamwork and the cohesion kind of replicate what I see on screen to what they're I guess more or less just chanting at each other and screaming at each other. I mean, it's just like communication, I'm sure, in my games, but we're all just screaming that it's winnable. But going back to the question before with TSN losing Lubbock, I think that they'll be just fine in that manner too, because Delavigne, like we were saying, is that flex champion. Like he can play what needs to be played, and I think for a tank more or less for Darkin, just to fill over for that Brigitte role for the Super McCree composition that they were already playing, looked very good on. I think that they could still do that for sure, unless the Brigitte overextends, which we've seen happen time and time again in this region. They do or die by that, unfortunately. But I think that the TSN will still do just fine, if not continue to show us what they got by other measures within the roster.
I mean, they're also in control of their destiny moving forward too.
Yep.
So that is in perspective, right? So
right.
Another thing though too is that I think that this moment is the most trouble obviously this is a very easy argument to make, but this is the most trouble that they're going to be in. But the reason why I say that is because even though their last two matchups are against the literal bottom two teams in this region, I mean, we're talking about Ints, who has struggled in terms of series throughout this season, and they're going up against Quad in week 5, another team that has kind of struggled. Let's be honest though, Ints has had their moments. Ints has looked good sometimes. It's not always a case of Ints struggling all the way through every single time we see them play. I mean, they just played Caverna, who we've been touting as this team that has looked a lot more solid as time has progressed. They took 2 maps off. They made a very, very good run against Caverna. Yes, they lost to Predators pretty decisively. Yes, they did lose to Quad Gaming as well, but we haven't yet determined where TSN was at versus Quad Gaming and Ints, especially Ints at their best. Like I said before, you know, when I was talking about right in the intro, actually, I was talking about how you know, you could lump Quad and Ints into that kind of middle of the pack if you're talking about peak performance.
I think that's the highlight. We were just to throw a little behind the scenes look here. We were talking before about what teams we wanted to talk about here, and Ints was one of the ones that one of the names that came up. We're like, how do we want to talk about them? Because again, how do we talk about them? This is a team where we've seen week 1, it was
coaching changes too.
Coaching changes, but more than that, week 1, it was a team where I was like, I watched them like, okay, I don't think they're the best team in this group. I don't think they're the worst team in this group. They're not like terrific, but they're definitely giving trouble to teams. And then week 2, we saw them like, oh, this is not the same team as last week. And then they come in the week after and they're like, again, they took 2 maps off. So it's like, what are we seeing from Ints? Why are they doing this? And I think when we talk about not being able to place the team because we're not sure what they're capable of, Ints has been sincerely the dark horse of this particular group, just because we're not sure which team's going to show up.
They've gone through so many different iterations too. Like they've changed so many different times. I remember that like Svenko was the one that stood out mostly to me, but now he's on the bench. So I mean it's changing a lot in perspective to where the meta is for Overwatch. You can't really always be swapping out those players. I mean, we've even seen teams at the highest caliber in the Overwatch League struggle with such a manner. When you have such a big roster, implementing all these different specialists, how do you actually do that? Because you almost need that flexibility. And where the meta is so strengthened by 3-3, that GOAT's composition, like you really just need that for all your players. And you need that consistency. You need that trust.
On Ints though, they don't play GOATs, or they don't play GOATs properly, or they don't play it frequently. Like, when I look at this roster, right, and I'm looking at Ints, I'm like, okay, there's players in this roster that I'm like, I can see are being good. Like they're not, I wouldn't say they're world beaters, but they're definitely tall, like above average in this region. It just, part of the problem is like, when you see them play, they don't seem to want to play things that are what we would call meta, right? Like they're not playing GOATs, they're not playing Brig against a Tracer. Sam was able to like when they were playing against Predators, he was able to just farm their backline for no real reason. And then the next matchup they decide to play Brig and they succeed a little bit more. This is a team of question marks, frankly, because their decision making behind it is so questionable. It's almost like they walk into the match the day of and they're like, yeah, today we're gonna throw a dart on a dartboard and be like, whichever name it lands on, that's who's playing. And I don't know. I really don't know.
Really doesn't work out well.
It doesn't, but I think one of the things here too is, you know, they got 4-0'd by Predators, and Predators is a team we haven't even talked about yet. They're currently sitting in the 2nd spot. They are the team that is closest right now to the team at the top in Based Tryhards as far as records go and anything like that. But from how this seems to go, do we actually think that they are the 2nd best team in this group is a question I think has to be asked. And who will be the 2nd best team if it's not them? Because right now, that's the position they are in.
This is one of those weird things where the transitive proper doesn't work, because TSN exactly. 4-0'd Predators, right? And now they're promptly got 4-0'd. So it's like, I don't know. This team is, when you say Predators is the 2nd best team in this group, I'm like, okay, because the remainder of the group is like such a mess, right? So
are they? Are they the 2nd best? That's the question. Are they the 2nd best? Because that's where they're sitting right now. But like you said,
I got this.
They got 4-0.
I was about to say I want to play the villain, but please, Heurix, please.
I've got this. They are not the 2nd best team, and I can say that I think without a doubt. And the reasoning behind it is because there is no second best team.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I
That's
think
a good way.
I think if you look at this group the same way that I came in on the intro, if you look at this group, if you look at most of Group B as well, you're talking about a bunch of teams that are, in terms of performance, the same. They're just the same. I mean, on any given week, one week you might see Ents take a 2-3 loss against Caverna, where despite Yax and Drusker both playing out of their minds, good setup plays from guys like Svenko. There's a lot of good plays being made. They still take that loss. A couple of decisions that are made differently. All of a sudden, Ents has that win, and they're not sitting at 0-3. They're sitting at 1-2, and you start seeing. I mean, there's a lot more of this aspect of just being a lot more close than I think the records entail. And I think Predators being in second right now is just a result of that's the timeline we're in right now.
A coin flip, essentially.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
I think if you look at it this way, this way, it's like there are 12 teams in Contenders Season 3.
Yeah.
There are 12 teams in Season 3. There are 10 teams that are just randomly mismatched. There are 2 teams only that are where they belong.
And I
frankly.
think another thing too for Predators to point out, their last 2 weeks, they play the 2 toughest teams that they're going to play probably from this group, or arguably in both BTH and Caverna. So I think that maybe that's part of it as well, is that they got the easier part of their schedule in the beginning, and they happened to get Sakino in a spot where they were just, I don't know, I don't even think Sakino knows what it was. So it's like, I think that putting it the way you did here is a good way to put it, that we don't really know. And maybe a group we don't even know more about is Group B.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting. This was going to be great.
This group has been pretty crazy. I mean, we just look at the top right now. LFT-OWL is the top. I don't know. The way the season went, it seemed like Up Gaming was going to be the team to beat. They 4-0'd everybody up until they got to LFT-OWL. And then they saw LFT-OWL. And now here we are. They're the top team. So I think the first thing we have to go to, is this team is this the second best team in the entire Contender South America? Is that what they are?
I don't know. No, I mean, like they're definitely got a lot of bright spots. That's for sure. I mean, you take a look at where the meta is that I keep talking about Zenyatta's, like your resident support main, by the way, keeps talking about Zenyatta's over here, but like it's Olay is definitely up there. He's the number one Zenyatta. I'll put money on the line. He's by far the best one. He implements a lot of good things for LFT out. Are they the best though? I don't know. We can't tell yet.
I think the problem is, like, when I look at LFT Owl, there's question marks that perhaps I think at every single role there's a question mark. Olay is great. Is Pizza Lover consistent enough to be called great? Right?
I think if you're outside of a Mercy,
his internet's not.
Certainly. Oh, yikes. But if you're outside of a Mercy meta and you put that man in a cafe that has consistent internet, then then I think they're a lot better on paper. But if you put them back into a meta that we were in last season, or if we move into a meta that involves more Pharah, then I think that can cause some issues, because we've seen some inconsistencies with Pizza Lover. But in terms of their position, LFT, I think, versus Up, yes, they're a tier above that middle of the pack, but I think they're still in that same category of we're just in that timeline right now. I mean,
watching that head-to-head of Up versus LFT Owl, right? Watching that head-to-head, that was a game where Up Gaming just didn't show up. That's not the Up Gaming we've seen in the past.
And think about how close those matches were too. I mean, we're talking about a matchup where it really came down to the line, especially on those last 2 maps coming out of halftime. I mean, there was some back and forth before the half, but it felt like Up Gaming kind of defeated themselves on Hanamura and on, I believe it was Route 66 for that last map. So I mean, I think this is just a case, just like the middle of the pack is for this region, where these teams are remarkably close to one another. I mean, ridiculously close to one another, to the point where if we somehow, and I haven't even structured it in my brain how the playoff bracket even works, if we saw them again play each other in the playoffs, it could easily flip without anything else changing. Obviously, something else might change, but from now and then. But I think it's the case of if you make them play again, even just today, just go at it. Upgaming can take that 3-1 and look just as good as LFT did. I mean, it really just is the case that these teams are just way too close. And I think saying, are they the best in this group? No. Are they the second best in the region? No. I think it's a little bit of a tie between them and Upgaming.
Yeah,
I'm glad you brought that up too, because I mean, like, just to highlight it for everybody's sake, like, full hold against LFT Owl by Upgaming on Hollywood, full hold against Upgaming by LFT Owl on Hanamura. So both these teams struggling to take point A capture points on different maps. But essentially, I mean, at its core physics, you're taking the first capture point. I mean, I know it's just almost the same as saying it's almost the same forehead, but it's really more than that. But I mean, like, it really goes to show you, to Heurix's point, like, how close these teams really are. And I think when we get deeper in that, I'm almost really hoping that we get to see them play each other again, because that'll definitely be a slobber knocker in the playoffs if LFT Owl and Upgaming meet again.
To put in terms of where we're at now versus where we were at in season 2, and even, historically just in the South American region as a whole, every team is competing to be first place. Obviously, that's the goal. But it's never really a truly achievable goal when you have Based Tryhards in the conversation. Every team is essentially trying.
I've got a way to say this. There's a blob. There's a blob of teams that are all kind of here, and then above that blob is one team, and that is Based Tryhards. Everybody's trying to get out of the blob and get to where Based Tryhards is. There's a couple of teams that are maybe below the blob as well, but there's just this. It's sort of if you're a fan of the NFL, there's a couple of teams that are always just clearly a cut above everybody else, and then there's everybody else fighting for those spots, getting into the playoffs where anything can happen. Obviously, that hasn't been the case here in South America, where the playoffs have kind of gone, well, it's whatever team Brazil Gaming House is calling themselves, now Based Tryhards. But there's still that sort of feeling to it, is that you're trying to chase those teams that are at the top, or in this case, one team, and that being Based Tryhards, and then everybody else is kind of on a given day.
To that point, though, I think this is probably the first season. We haven't really talked about this yet, but Klaus and Alamong both leaving South America. Alamong obviously to Overwatch League directly, so that's a huge pickup right there. And Klaus to Uprising Academy, so NA Contenders. We haven't really talked about what that means for the region in general, because I think what this is finally starting to do is that Based Tryhards have had to make changes to remain competitive, to remain the best in the region, right? Just because they lost 2 players. But I think teams are finally starting to realize that it's no longer just we have to beat Based Tryhards. I think there's finally a recognition that there's a path to beyond Contenders South America, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like Alamong and Klaus leaving or being picked up is so huge, because there's always, I think when we talked about South America in the past, it was always a case of they're good, but, right? Like we were never talking about, we talked about BTH as being great in South America, but we never asked ourselves, how do they compare against other regions? Korea, North America, EU, et cetera, et cetera.
I feel like that definitely shows how open the door really is for not only this region, but for multiple regions. Like, we saw Fusions come over for EU. Like, look at Boston really go. Like, they're really showing that there are these opportunities. There are eyes that are on these regions. You really need to be showing your or be putting your best foot forward. Like, not to make it sound so elementary, but that's really what it is. Like, you can't. You want to be playing your best at all the time, and I think we saw a little bit of that shift here in that region, that it really was a step up almost. Not saying that last season wasn't as competitive, but take a look at last season compared to this season, and I think this season is a little bit more intense as far as just how meaty the groups are towards one another.
It's almost like all the players. It's almost like all the players took a breath and just reset themselves on that path. Yeah. Right. It's like last season, that they're going for it, but then this season they're like, not only are we going for it, we know that there's a way to make it now. Right? I feel like that sense of hopelessness is gone about South America.
So right now, all these players right now are trying to get themselves in that conversation. Because I agree, I think it was a huge thing that they were able to make their way and open up that conversation for South America being worthy of at least putting your eyes on it, right? Start looking at it, start scouting it out, because there is a lot of potential here. So now what teams are wanting to do, now what players specifically are wanting to do, is start putting themselves in the conversation. The best way to do that is to be in that top spot. Obviously, that's the easiest way to get noticed, and the easiest way to do that is to be the Isurus to Based Tryhard. I mean, you have to be that team that's consistently playing up against the toughest competition in the region. And so far, what we've seen is that it's been LFT Owl and it has been Upgaming being this season's Isurus, this season's team to beat outside of Based Tryhards. However, I think the most interesting thing about Group B that's happening right now, yes, you do have a little bit of a difference between LFTL, Upgaming, and the rest. I think Isurus Gaming having this big bounce back that we've seen from them after losing two of their players, after losing their coaching staff from last season as well, and being able to look as good as they have the last 2 weeks with potential to continue that level of growth has been the most compelling thing to watch, I think, in Group B outside of that race between LFT and Up.
Speaking of Isurus, because I think this is a team that's really, really creative, and I know, Panda, you and I had a conversation about this at the end of last season, is that we were super high on their DPS duo last season, Valen and Klaus.
Right.
And I was personally very high on Ravage, their main tank. They came into the season week 1 and we're like, this is not the Isurus from last season. It's not.
Yep.
You lose Klaus to BTH. You know how good Klaus is. We've been talking about this nonstop. But they also lose their coaching staff, and I feel like that put Isurus back 2 or 3 steps more than they thought they would. And it took them that first week just to sort of smarten up and be like, yo, okay, we get it. We're not the top dog outside of BTH anymore, right? They needed to actually play that. It almost like they needed that first week to wake up. They made a couple switches in the roster. They brought Jane and
Cougar.
Cougar. No, Cougar was in first week. I think they subbed him out. Matthias.
Matthias is in there now. Yeah.
Matthias is But Cougar was first week, but and it's almost like they finally realized they couldn't just sit around and play and be the Isurus of old. They had to like reforge, I guess, their roster, and they kind of did that. And I think
it's an entirely different style for them too, though. I mean,
yeah,
right.
I know we've talked about it a lot, Lafon, between you and I, whether it be on desk or just in meetings and talking about them and discussing them. It's always been that they were DPS centric, and we've gone over their players. They had excellent players on their roster last season that they were able to kind of lean on. Yes, they had other great play happening outside of their DPS, but most of what was happening was very DPS centric. It was a lot of space creation to allow for their DPS players to make big clutch plays, and they did a lot with that. Yeah, it might not have been enough for BGH, but they had a lot of success with that. Now we're into a different meta and certainly a different kind of roster that they're utilizing for this new season, that it's a lot to adjust to, and it's almost I think it would be unexpected for them to come out of the gates just blazing through the way that we saw them in season 2. So to see them have that hiccup in week 1, I think is almost an expectation than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, you almost got to get shook to come out a little bit less tremored, right?
Especially against LFT. I mean,
right.
That's the thing. It was against LFT.
Yeah.
And Isurus Gaming, we keep bringing up, like, it was the one that took the map off of what was Brazil Gaming House last season, and that could be all fine and dandy, but like the core of
Isurus, LFO
or LFO, yeah, sorry, but even still, Isurus Gaming last season, it still stood out to me. Like we were talking about Lafon at the end of last season, the DPS stood out to me, but it's still the core of Isurus Gaming. It's still the team that did half decently last season. So
I mean, just to put it in perspective, the only maps they lost during regular season were because they had a network connection. Yeah, they had network connection issues. So Isurus last season was on the level. They only lost to BGH essentially. Just to put that there. Like that's how it went.
Exactly.
I think another thing to point out too, Valen isn't on the team anymore.
They lost both DPS. Correct.
That's the thing, is that they lost both of them, and then all of a sudden that carpet that that entire foundation that they've built up for their team, their composition, their styles, all of their strats, it was built around allowing Klaus and Valen to make plays they're not there anymore. Now you have to not only integrate 2 new players into your system, but you have to worry about, do we build a system around them? Do we maintain the system that is built around them? Or do we start playing something else, especially in a new meta where at the moment, the center is around other types of players. It's around, enabling your Zarya at times, enabling your Reinhardt at times. There's a lot of different dynamics at play than what was happening at times in season 2, especially for a team like Isurus that really leaned on that and really did a lot with it.
And I think when you get down to it too, like that's where we saw X-Ravage really come into his own. I definitely remember him better for his Reinhardt than his Winston, and that's definitely where Isurus Gaming have their brighter spots, and where they're definitely showcasing their middle of the pack mentality, and where their fight can probably come from. But I think even circling back to the first question that you asked us, Lobosco, like, is LFTL really that team to look out for? Like, I'd put my money down that we'll probably see the grand finals of LOTL versus Base. To be honest with you, they're doing such a good job of avoiding one another that we're probably gonna have that that giant that giant Goliath matchup eventually, and that's probably gonna be crazy exciting unless something happens.
Even though that's the case, if you told me any one of the teams in the top 4 right now on the Group B or top 3 on the Group B side were gonna make finals, I would believe you.
Yeah, 100%.
The top 4 is the biggest question here.
Yeah, top 4. Yeah, I like you could literally tell me that top 4 in Group B can make finals. I'm like, yeah, I can see it.
But look at the bottom is I think where we need to go to next, because LF.org was a team that, unfortunate against Isurus, had a DC, ended up having to put in a sub, and then they kind of didn't look the same after that. It was actually a pretty good series up until that point. They're the team currently sitting in 4th, and they've got to hold off a team in Fury in that position. Fury is the team that potentially could take that spot from them. That's, I think, actually, I think it's their last. Yeah, they play each other the last week of the season too. So those two, I think, have to be paid attention to as well. We already talked about any team could potentially make it to not the team in 4th spot because they play Based Tryhards. So
I was gonna say that DC actually ended up being, looking for Oregon is gonna make the playoffs. They're gonna play Based Tryhards first week.
Yeah, they're definitely gonna get the 4th seed. That's for sure. Yeah. I mean, Fury, again, my heart will forever say Fury, but they have not adapted well to where this the current support situation is at. And although I really like Win98's decision making, the hero pool and the comfortness for that hero pool of Zenyatta and Lucio just isn't there for Fury right now. And they
when we talked about Alamong earlier, we talked about the support role. You can't have your support play both support roles. You just can't. You can't have your support play main support and then 20 minutes later play flex support. It's just not going to work. I don't understand. I would love to talk to the staff behind that, because why do you play Zen Lucio and then you're playing Moira Mercy Lucio? That doesn't make sense to me. If you can explain it, please. But I just feel like for Fury, there's just too many question marks around why are they playing the way they do? And don't get me started on Moira Goats, but for the most part, I feel like it's not the optimal choice.
It's really not. I mean, Zenyatta with that Discord orb, 35% to the Reinhardt. You're helping out your Reinhardt coming up on top of that battle set where you have a shield and they don't. I mean, it sounds really simple when you put it down on paper, but it's one thing that they are lacking from the team, and it's that cohesion that they really are missing as far as the composition is concerned and lacking in those team fights. It's really making them fall behind. And again, I gotta say, my heart says Fury. I want them to make it to the playoffs again. Again, this is almost the core of Breakdown Gaming, where they made it through that historic run through trials. Man, they got the Blizzbucks, dude, and they're making it this far, but it's not enough, man. It's not enough. LFL are definitely taking that 4th spot, but they're gonna lose the Based Tryhards. I like the storyline.
Well, LFO
go ahead.
Fury being that, that's going to be the biggest game for them, without a doubt. And that's not the only big game that we have coming up that's left, though, either. I mean, I think that's something to point out as well, as we have some really big matchups in week 4 and week 5. So the biggest question I have for you guys then for these next 2 weeks that are coming up, what are games that you're going to be paying attention to more than others? Because, there are games that you're just not going to pay attention to as much. Unfortunately, when Black Dragons plays Isurus, yeah, sure, Black Dragons has had a tough season, but there's another game right after that where it's LFO versus Up, and that's one to me that I think is going to be super interesting going into these final 2 weeks.
If I had to pick, I would say just Up Gaming.
Yeah.
I think every
Right.
single one of their matches
Yeah.
on here on out
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah.
I was actually about to say that I would go further and take Upgaming's match versus Isris as the best match to look out for.
Yeah.
But I can certainly see that how there might be a case for LFO. I think that's probably one of the best. I'm trying to think of what the Saturday matchups are. I think it's probably the best matchup that we're gonna get this coming week going into week 4.
Right.
I think I say that pretty decisively, but I think in terms of week 4 and week 5, whatever we have collectively for the rest of the season, Up Gaming closing out their season against Isris, especially Isris on the rise, possibly retaking their form from last season. That is going to be the sickest matchup that I think is to come from this season 3, moving into the playoffs, where both of those teams, in my opinion, are pretty much set. In terms of being able to make it into the playoffs, it's just going to be a question of where they wind up and who they're going to be playing. Because again, if you look at Group A, this is a situation where any one of these teams on any given day is, they could just beat each other. I mean, Predators, Caverna, and to a degree, TSN Quad and Ints, just depending on what their performance level is like on that very day. All those teams, I don't even know who I would pick out of that to be, like the actual top. So to say, second versus third, there's not a huge argument other than, what they might play and what maps they might be good on in terms of having advantages for playoff placement. But Upgaming Isris, in terms of just a good match to watch, I think that's the go-to right there.
Especially if Up struggles with LFO in week 4, that becomes an even the microscope on that one. You focus it in a little bit more on that one. I do think there's still some good games though to pay attention to in Group A. I think you can't forget what week 4 has in Predators versus Based Tryhards. I mean, I think this is where we see Predators finally get tested. This is the game where you see what they're really made of, if they can really make it a challenge for Based Tryhards, or even if they can take a map. Obviously, I don't think many people expect it, but if they do it, that is huge.
It's hard to expect it. It's hard to expect.
I got a real test though, a real test, because like we've mentioned, on any given day, any of these teams probably from Group A can be beaten by any of the other teams other than Based Tryhards, obviously, who have, as you mentioned, they're kind of just above that blob. But
Right.
Predators,
I think I know where you're
I
going.
believe in week 5 are taking on Caverna.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think
exactly what I was
that
thinking.
is the best. Obviously, both of these matches, of course, have to happen in week 5, and
That's
it's a
gonna
great
have
way
some
to close
spice,
the
man.
season out. But absolutely, those 2 days, because they will happen on different days, one on Thursday, one on Saturday. Those are the games to watch for me, because I think those are going to be really close matchups, and they're going to decide, who are the teams to look at going into the playoffs, where we can have another conversation of, where is everybody truly landed in comparison to where we expected them, where we saw them, and now where they're actually at, versus from coming out of trials, coming into week 1, where we're at right now, going into week 4, versus 2 weeks from now, going into playoffs.
I think there are a lot of ifs at play for my most intense maps to watch, or matches to watch out for. Just because, like we were highlighting all throughout this podcast, I mean, both groups outside of Based Tryhards and LFT Owl are just so open. But if Fury upsets by taking a map off of LFT Owl, I mean, LFT Owl have shown some stumbles in their maps before, and Fury, they are adept as a team, and they can come prepared to take a few maps off of LFT Owl. If that's the case, then there are more ifs at play, all the way down to me agreeing with Lobosco that if it comes down to LFO versus Fury, that last match of the regular season on December 22nd, like that could have the most spice to any stakes.
I'm just gonna say,
season.
like, as a storyline,
yeah,
a game on the 22nd of December, deciding playoffs would be the greatest Christmas gift you could give to that team.
I'm sitting here, and again, like,
It'd
my
be
heart
pretty
is
good.
battling with my brain. It's hard because I want to see it
want
happen.
that to be a storyline, just because
Yeah.
it'd be so much fun.
It'd be
It would just be
great.
so much fun.
It'd be great.
It's not even just that too, though, because if you think about it, there's another game that is that Thursday, not the Saturday, not the one of the final games, but in that other group, Group A, where it could be very much a decider as well. TSN, if they wind up, struggling with that new roster combination and trying to figure out, how exactly to integrate Dagestem, as well as how Darkin is going to work in that roster. How are they going to utilize him? Are they going to be, changing things up to be very Brig centric, or what? What are they going to do? If they stumble a little bit, they're going to allow Quad Gaming to have a potential for some catch up here, because we're going to see them go up against Caverna. Caverna, yes, is looking a lot better, but it's a beatable matchup. And at the moment, as long as they take some maps off, we could actually see pretty much a tie, more or less, if Sequinho winds up slipping a little bit, because they are playing against Ints. Ints is, on the possibility of a rise where Sequinho Nations makes that first slip and Quad Gaming capitalizes. And that would be a really cool way to end out that group as well, with Quad Gaming basically, having not really been in that conversation throughout the season. TSN has been in that conversation. And in fact, the expectation has been there for them. And to see them fall out in what is the last game of that group in the group stage, that would be very insane as well.
I think you just summarized it perfectly. Like, the entire region in this season altogether, it's just like there's so many swaps. There's so many different
parity.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many different things being laid on this grill for that the stakes haven't even been able to settle. They haven't been marinated yet, my dude. So it's like, it's really hard to gauge which match would be the best to watch, because there's a lot of ifs, just general ifs going into this. I love it. I love this region. I love every little spark that's coming from each individual game, even with Based Tryhards through passing on their members to NA contenders. Like, it's been just a very fun season altogether, and it's made for some incredible matchups and for incredible stories altogether.
Yes, and the storylines can change here in just a little bit too. The one thing that we know potentially could be happening, we don't know when, we don't know if it'll happen, we think it will, is that we could have a potential patch change. Might not come until playoffs, but this is something that is entirely possible. And guys, if this does, chances are it's going to be 1.3. I don't believe it's going to be 1.31, especially now the fact that we have Blizzard World, which can't even be played right now. So you probably don't see that patch.
Shame.
But 1.3 is entirely a possibility. We know we're going to potentially see Ash at some point as well. When this change, this shift comes in with this newest patch to the Contenders client, how does this change as far as how we look at the landscape of Contenders South America? Who does this benefit? Does this send somebody over the edge? Does this really help somebody maybe make it to that finals against BTH? Does BTH get hurt by this?
It depends how much Numbani is affected. Like,
Yeah.
how much is Numbani, or more correctly, it depends how much Numbani affects the matches. Because Numbani is the one map where things have been changed up a lot, actually. You see a lot of Super McCree comp, you see a lot of Pharah, Doomfist, Sombra to a certain extent. I think everywhere else it doesn't really change anything. Goats is still very, very strong.
Torbjorn being played on Numbani point A defense this region. It's been fun.
Numbani has been I highlighted this at the very beginning of the season, and I stand by it now. Numbani is the game changer, because if you go to Numbani, you have either Numbani or Hollywood. Hollywood is going to be Goats. We know this. Maybe some Sombra Doomfist, but mostly Goats. Numbani, though, with all that higher ground on first, you're going to see some strange things. And I think if you can make Numbani a game changer, like if you scrim Numbani and put it in your map pool, your map selection as your game changer, where you switch the narrative of the match, then yes, 1.3 is probably going to change it. The only problem is that's not how this goes. That's not how this goes. So I feel like we can talk about patch changes, but realistically, I doubt it really changes much.
I don't think we'll see much Ash being played. It's not going to go to 1.31. We'll see the current live patch enabled, where the Brigitte to change with the shield bash and the
which, by the way, makes Goats better.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. But it'll still be Goats regardless. So don't hold your hat to it too closely. It's fine. It's okay.
I will say that this region historically isn't often the region to take on the new heroes first. You'll see a lot of times, you'll see occasionally like the NAEU, a lot of times China takes on these new heroes very quickly and adapts them. But then again, China does a lot of different things.
Yeah,
as
oh,
per
China
the
for sure.
regions.
They-
Quad DPS.
they
You get us
love their
started in China.
hamster
We'll go
comp,
for
yeah.
we'll go for hours on China.
We have
But-
seen some quad DPS in SA though. We have.
Yep.
But-
On
but
map
here-
4s only though.
That's true. That's true. However, to stay on track, though, I do think that this is going to be consistent. I think, last season is a great gauge. We didn't see that much Doomfist.
We
It
didn't see
was-
that much Wrecking Ball either.
Yeah, didn't see that much
Yeah.
Wrecking Ball. It was realistically only one team that wound up really kind of playing that more than any other, which was Revolts, now Up Gaming. And they played both, and it was because Educus came into the roster and they had that effect. They did a lot with what I called the Chaos comp at the time. We hadn't seen much of, where it was essentially just that Doomfist Sombra approach. However, Shazine was playing the Hammond, so the Wrecking Ball, whatever you want to call it. So I mean,
You can call him
have
Hammond. It's
that-
okay.
Jeff said it's okay.
So I don't think we're going to be. I agree. We're not going to be seeing much Ash. If we do, it'll be kind of pocket strats and integrated as a means to create the effect of, for lack of a better term, hazing, I guess, where you can throw out that grenade or the dynamite and blow that up and have some impact damage before fights ensue. And certainly if you can take effect with high ground. So I'm not exactly sure how teams would want to implement that, but if they do, it won't be very often.
I think the most important part would probably be Bob Tour to Ash's kit altogether, just from
That's
the
fair,
pop up for the Reinhardt to get a cleaner shatter so you can save the shield bash for like a counter dive of sort.
It's certainly not a quick charging ult though.
It's
So that's
exactly,
something
but
to consider as
it's
well.
not in any place where you wouldn't take a Widowmaker instead, because not only do you gain more benefits out of the one-shot kill onto the squishy targets when they offer themselves, say like we'll take Ruins for example, but because Ruins has been Widowmaker playground for so long, where's she been? You see mostly just 3-3 on that map, just because it's just so strong. Like even if you see one Widowmaker versus the 3-3, the D.Va can pounce on the Widowmaker, displace her.
And to that point,
you can still
just
win a
as,
team
like
fight
on
with that
a
point.
meta side, on Ruins you end up seeing a lot of Winston
Right.
goes too. So you have like two
Yeah.
heroes that can change the Widow.
Yeah.
I think from a meta standpoint, and I don't want to drag this too long because there's meta analysis is really complicated and it's tough to
Could go
to
forever.
Your
Yeah,
crafting is
yeah.
dangerous.
And it's per map too, so we
Yeah.
can sit here and so
we could
don't
sit
want-
here
you don't want
literally
that.
forever.
Yeah.
So
But
then I-
I'm just like just to condense it and basically in two lines is that teams that are more willing to just keep doing what they're good at and get better at that are probably going to succeed more rather than bring in pocket picks and pocket strats.
yeah. Look at
Yep.
Rogue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Look at
yeah.
Selfless.
Very good
Perfect.
point. So I guess then I'll make it a very quick thing. Do we see any Ash in SA whenever that patch comes through? Yes or no?
No, I mean, MJ, you can't tell, but I have a thumbs down right now. No, that's a negatory.
I will be
Lafon?
very surprised if it's more than 2 maps.
Heurix?
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with Lafon here. I think we'll see
I'm okay with
one
seeing
team play it twice, but all other teams playing it either not at all or maybe a couple sprinklings of like once for a couple of minutes, and then they'll just get off of it.
That's fine. I'll take that. I'll take it.
Lobosco likes
I
hit
like
scan
hit scan
heroes.
DPS, so I'm totally cool with that. And I've been totally cool with this entire podcast GG that we've had tonight. It's been a really good one. So glad that you've joined us all the way to this point. Of course, don't forget to go to BroadcastGG. You can go there for any of the information. Go to our Twitch to watch all of these Contenders South America games. Also, of course, if you're up late at night on a Saturday or Sunday, you can also watch Contenders China, where we have a bunch of great casters who are part of that as well. And of course, if you want to follow us, we'll throw out the Twitter handles there for you. Mine is at Lobosco. I mean, go ahead, Lafon, tell them yours and your specific spelling. I know it's important for you because I have a capital B in mine. So
Yeah, lowercase everything, please and thank you. At Lafon H on Twitter, and yeah,
I have fun.
I'm
Capital
going
I.
to report you. I'm going to report you for that.
His name is actually Blank. For those that
Yeah,
don't know.
no, yeah, that's actually true. That's actually true.
So that's the real CT Heurix on the bottom right, by the way, and of course on Pokemon Panda. We Twitch handles are on our handles, of course, but it's at the end of the day, definitely appreciate always discussing all of these matchups and just this beautiful region and Overwatch altogether. Just a fun game and just this region playing team sports.
Don't sleep on South America.
Yeah, you can't.
They'll
Don't.
surprise you.
They take team
Definitely
sports to
don't.
the next level, and integrating that into esports, that is just the next beautiful thing coming at you.
it's super cool. And you're not going to be done seeing us either. We'll be back eventually. Don't with how this went, we have to do this more, so it's going to happen. I'll make sure of it. But again, thank you so much for being here to the end of this one. But that's going to do it. Go watch those matches. They're going to be great these last couple weeks.